One family. This is Dr. Laura Turner Essel, and I am back with you for a quick Black Parent Village check in. I just wanted to unpack a conversation that I've been having with a few parents in my Black Parent Village group. You can learn more about the group at blackpeoplethrive.com. But we've been having some interesting conversations. And one of the things that has come up repeatedly, I've done videos about it and blog posts and things like that. But it's because the parents are so activated on this issue of popular culture and the themes that they observe coming up in their kids' music and the videos that they're into. And so I really just like to break down some of the underlying dynamics that are going on with that and to give them language and encouragement to really confront these things and address what they notice because their intuition about it is usually very correct. We are all B1 people. And what does that mean? Dr. Boyce Watkins reminds us that we are Black first, right? So whether we have the same religion or not doesn't matter. Whether we have the same sexual identity or gender doesn't matter. Whether we're from the same geographic region, maybe we are in completely different classes as far as socioeconomic status. None of that really matters. What matters first and foremost is that we are Black, and we know that that's more than just a skin color. It also has to do with our heritage and our culture, right, as people of African descent. And so we are clear that we're coming to the table because we love our community, we love our people, and we want to see all of our folks thrive, right? So that is what makes us B1. We are Black first, and all the other identity factors can be sorted out later or not, but it just is a non-issue for us because we're here to deal with what affects all of us as Black people. So we know that we have certain values that we are trying to instill in our children. We want them to be happy and healthy. We want them to be financially literate and economically empowered. We want them to be able to build their own successful families and have meaningful interpersonal relationships, whether that's with a spouse or a child or friends or coworkers or whatever. We want them to have the skills to be able to navigate their social worlds and deal with other people in healthy ways, right? And we want them to have a sense of pride and identity in who they are, to know themselves, to value themselves. Well, when you know that and you have that clear vision for your family, then it becomes really problematic when you see over and over and over again something that is opposite that being kind of dumped onto them, right? And that's what it feels like with the media that's really bombarding them from all of these different platforms and all of these different channels nowadays. Even if they're not seeking it, it's coming to them, it's just in the air, the music, the videos. And of course, the kids get hooked on it. And so they want to defend it and they want to talk about how it's just music and how it's just entertainment. But as parents, it's our job to be wiser than that and to know when something is really threatening and detrimental to our children's well-being and their development. Now, the interesting issue that has come up is that when we as parents go to confront these things and, kind of set some boundaries around what themes and what images are going to be acceptable in our household or for our children that we're, responsible for raising, we get the pushback, usually from the kids themselves, but also from other parents or from the broader society, that we are engaging in respectability politics. So today I want to talk about respectability politics. What are they? What does that mean? Why is it problematic? And how is it different from a legitimate concern for the health and well-being of our children, our families, and our Black community? How can we learn to distinguish between respectability politics that are trying to get white people to, love us and accept us and see us as worthy, or like an actual criticism of something that we see as harmful and hurtful to our Black children and our Black community that we want to address because we actually love ourselves as Black people and value other Black people, value our children, value our community, and don't want to see it harmed by these toxic messages coming at us day in and day out. Also, what's at the root of both of these things? That's what I want to talk about today. So, what is respectability politics? Well, respectability politics describes the belief that we can gain our worthiness. So, our worthiness of rights or jobs or just help or assistance from other people through our ability to assimilate and imitate the dominant, players in society. So, white, male, upper middle class, capitalist characteristics, right? So, the idea that we deserve to be hired because we can speak as properly as they do, or we can dress just like they do. We can display the Protestant work ethic that they'd like us to believe they all have, right? So, as much as we can imitate white males, um, that's how deserving we are of inclusion, of opportunities, and of all of these basic things. Conversely, the narrative also tells us that if we don't act like them or adopt their values, and we don't display those characteristics that we've been told to associate with whiteness, then we're less worthy, right? So if we talk in Black vernacular, or we don't go to college, or we talk too loud when we're out in public, or maybe we wear our hair nappy or natural, then we're like an embarrassment to the race. The politics part is that people start to feel like if we don't line up with what they perceive to be the dominant white values and prove to our oppressors that we're actually just like them and we're capable and we're worthy, then we will be doing our whole race a disservice and setting us all back in terms of our economic and political power in this society. And so, again, this narrative is that if people don't line up with whiteness, then they deserve oppression. They deserve to be discriminated against, or they're fair game for those negative consequences because they didn't, prove that they were worthy. And so, basically, white people won't accept us unless we constantly prove that we deserve their respect and we're worthy to be accepted and given the basic rights and privileges that are supposed to come with US citizenship. So for us as a people, this mentality dates back a really long time, even to the period of enslavement, when some slaves felt that they could earn master's favor by assimilating to his culture and proving to him that they would reject their own Africanness in favor of his culture. We have to understand that this was a mentality of survival for our ancestors, that they actually knew that their very lives were in danger and that their status, their safety, and their ability to navigate slave society was very dependent on whether or not they got in good with master, they were liked by master, they were found acceptable by other white people. It has since then become a political strategy for many of our folks because we see it as a way to really continue to navigate a society that is very much still influenced by, shaped by, and in a lot of ways structured similarly to that plantation system. So, why are respectability politics so problematic? Well, besides the fact that they're based in trauma, it's really a trauma response based in a belief that we are dependent upon white acceptance, not only just to find ourselves acceptable, but for our very safety and survival. So it really goes to like the root of our, human experience that we honestly believe on some level, some subconscious level, that our lives are threatened or in danger. Our very existence is at stake if we don't align ourselves with whiteness or somehow incur favor and approval by white society. It's also really divisive, right? Because it leaves us policing each other, judging each other as if we're the problem, when in reality, we're all subject to racism as long as white supremacy exists. And there's nothing that any individual can really do to be totally safe from a group based phenomenon such as racism. It's based on your membership in a group. So it's not about you as an individual. And even if you, as a single individual, can do things to get ahead in the system, um, and make yourself relatively safe compared to other Black people, none of us are actually free from this oppressive dynamic until it is destroyed and we're all free, right? So check out the Black and Brainy podcast, episode 1 on individualism and collectivism, and the discussion of Ubuntu philosophy and this idea that I am because we are, and not only that, but I can only be well when everyone's well. So basically, we end up with a bunch of Black people trying to distance themselves from their Blackness as much as possible in order to feel safe in a society and a system that has always been hostile towards Blackness and really has no intention of changing that. And this is what they feel like they have to do to survive and thrive in this anti-Black society. It takes different forms sometimes. It can even be dressed up in African garb, but it's the same mentality. I mean, think about this. If all of the research that you do on African history and culture and, talking about our great kingdoms and everything that we, accomplished from Egypt to the West African societies, if all of that is meant to convince white people that our ancient societies were just as good as theirs, or that we invented things first, well, we might want to question why they're the main audience for that information. If it's to kind of educate ourselves and our own children, then that's great. But if the only conversation we have is to have this kind of white facing, um, discussion about how great our history is, then we might need to re-examine that, because that could be a little bit of proving and striving and respectability going on even when we don't intend for it to be. And so again, it's the same mentality. The basis of it is that we really have to earn white acceptance and white validation and white acknowledgement, and that that's somehow really important for us. And I think we need to get ourselves to a point where it's not, and we don't care. And although there might be very real consequences for that, us pooling our resources together and supporting each other is a very powerful way to protect ourselves from having to give a damn what white people think. But the really detrimental thing about respectability politics is that it ignores the fact that all of these structures and laws and institutions are designed to keep white people ahead on every metric and to keep Black people at the bottom of the totem pole. No matter how much we run on that hamster wheel trying to keep up, that's just going to give them, more energy to keep dangling that carrot in front of us and steadily pushing back the finish line. The goal is never to actually help us win, just to watch us keep ourselves busy and wear ourselves out, because the energy that we expend trying to prove our worth and, get them to include us, they have figured out how to convert that energy to money, right? They have monetized it, because now we're out here buying stuff, we're pimping ourselves out, we're flooding into their stores and schools and workplaces and companies, destroying ourselves, trying to get them to say that we are worthy. They get rich, we get to waste our time on this earth. And that's time that we should be using to build something for our future generations, as our ancestors said, to build towards eternity. So Toni Morrison had a really great quote on this. She said, the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language and you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on the fact that it is. Somebody says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says you have no kingdoms, so you dredge that up. None of this is necessary. There will always be one more thing, right? They will always move that metric, move that finish line one more foot, one more mile, and tell you that you need to run just a little bit further to prove that you are worthy. And the truth is, we're all worthy to begin with. So, again, this is not to say that we shouldn't spend time studying our own history and the greatness of our societies and passing that information down to our children because we are an amazing people. We've done amazing things, and they do need to know that. So they have a strong sense of where they come from and the greatness that they carry in their DNA. But that's not the purpose of that, is not to convince white people of anything, it's to remind ourselves. So let's talk about how that respectability politics mentality, how that differs though from the legitimate concerns that we might have about our babies. So I want to connect this back to the pop culture because we have to learn to distinguish between arguments that are concerned with the white gaze and, oh, you need to, you know, stop wearing hoodies and stop, talking like that and wearing your hair like that because white people will think blah, 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 you know, or, people out there will think blah, blah, blah versus, um, and again, those are criticisms that come because people fear that we're jeopardizing our stance in white society, that we're jeopardizing our ability to assimilate um, into the dominant culture, right? Um, but that's different than conversations which are internal, right? Like in family conversations that come from a loving place. They're like constructive criticisms based on a real deep and genuine and sincere love for Black people and a concern about where we're headed and if it's healthy, and potentially that maybe our trauma is running the show here. Okay. So when we think about like what I described, the parents' concerns about, well, hey, I'm trying to teach my kid to be healthy, but they're listening to this music that's telling them that it's okay to go out and do drugs and party and live this lifestyle that is actually the opposite of what I want for them and what I want them to want for themselves. I want them to care for themselves and care for other people. So what's all this animosity between young Black men, and why is that so heavy in the pop culture? With what we know now about the power of media in our children's lives, and with them getting so much of their information from the digital space, and that stuff sometimes being unchecked by real deep connections to people within the Black community, even if we live in Black communities and Black neighborhoods, sometimes we don't talk to our neighbors. Sometimes we don't have, friends at church or mosque, or sometimes we don't really know the teachers at the school, and we don't have like deep connections to people. And so a lot of what our kids are absorbing is becoming their reality. It's replacing their actual neighborhood, their actual world. That's very dangerous, right? And so parents are really busy. Extended families may or may not be part of the picture. What we know from psychological science, from neuroscience about mirror neurons and also our racial identity development, we need to understand that these images and these messages constantly bombarding our children are an important issue for us to address as parents. I used to listen to uh, gangster rap growing up, and it was amusing to me. And I thought it was fun to hear at the parties and the clubs and stuff. And I listened to the music coming out of the South and out of the West Coast and all of that. But I also understood that that's not who my people were, and that wasn't an accurate representation of our families or our community structure. And even those of us who had, trouble in our youth, or who had distressed family situations, or who grew up in poverty or in impoverished neighborhoods, um, there is a big difference between the music kind of serving as, they used to say hip hop is like the broadcasting, it's like the news of the hood, that it was highlighting these realities that people were living through. But highlighting that reality and reporting on it, kind of as this is what it is different than what we have now, which is definitely marketing, right? It's glorifying and selling you this lifestyle. It's not just, oh, it's so messed up. My family's poor and there's people outside killing each other and there's gangs and drugs in my neighborhood. It's, oh, I'm a part of this and it makes me cool and powerful and you want to be like me because I am, I have all these guns and all these drugs and, I can buy all this stuff and I'm such a boss because I'm able to just kill people on a whim. Like that is a very different message than just letting people know about the rough reality of poverty and gang life, right? So it's, is it just like an objective telling of the story or are you selling me something? Are you selling me a lifestyle here that's not good for me? And Amos Wilson has written extensively. He's got two wonderful books, Black on Black Violence, The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination, and Issues of Manhood in Black and White. So this is Baba Dr. Amos Wilson, and he talks about the very serious Black and white psychodynamics that happen in Black communities where we're set up to see each other as the enemy. And again, we're encouraged to destroy each other both physically and mentally in the service of white supremacy. So here's the thing. If you can get to children early enough in their development that you replace their natural inborn, egocentricity and their feeling that all human beings are born with, that they're the center of the universe and they deserve to be loved and nurtured. If you replace that with a sense of shame or confusion about who they are, and then you combine that with the trauma of poverty or just even witnessing the vast disparities in our society, and then you teach them both formally and informally to associate that with their Blackness, you spin this narrative of their intellectual inferiority, that we get from schools, our educational system, and we also get it from the media. You combine all of these things. You don't even have to hit them over the head with racism. They internalize it anyway, right? And pretty soon they're looking at ways to cover up that shame. And then you hand them this culture and tell them that this is how they can be important. This is how they can be cool. This is how they can get rich. This is how they can become somebody by, you know, turning their back on their own Africanness and those values of, um, you know, loving humanity and being connected to other people, and sharing resources and, valuing interpersonal relationships and valuing spirituality. You destroy that, you have them reject that, and you replace it with this culture of hating everybody, hating themselves, and hating everybody else who carries the mark of that African essence. And this is how you end up with both a popular culture that's toxic and a middle class respectability politics culture that's toxic. And both of those are working in the service of white domination and white supremacy. They're really two sides of the same coin because they have at their root this hatred of self and this belief that the affiliation with whiteness, whether that's through institutions or brands or sexual partners or spouses or record labels or workplaces or whatever it is, however you can get close to whiteness, the belief that that's going to somehow save us. All of this is rooted in the myth of white superiority that is being fed to our children and that we carry ourselves into our adult lives. So that is actually the root of all of it. And that's what we need to attack, right? I've even seen us do this economically, where we boycott or complain about our own businesses in our Black neighborhoods to the point where we drive them out of business, right? And a lot of times, especially when it's like a formal protest type situation, there's some white instigator from outside the community who's encouraging us to have this vitriol, to have this this protest or this criticism, and to really persecute these businesses. And as soon as that Black business has gone under and is out of the picture, then this white entity moves in to now reap the profits of that Black community, right? And to take that wealth and that money out and put it into someone else's hands, right? Because those people didn't live in the community. You know, the owners of that white business um, don't live in that Black community. So again, we need to get to the root of what's happening so that when we see rappers glorifying this gang life and this consumer lifestyle and the promiscuity, we realize there are white record execs behind that. And we can see that the Black drug dealers and the gangsters in the community, there are these policies and laws and systems put in place that create that dynamic. All of this is in service of white domination and power. We're just being turned against each other in various ways. And we have to just recognize it and become offended enough and angry enough at the right people, right? At the right systems and not at one another. And stop using this as an excuse to destroy ourselves. So we have to think about how we can come together as Black people, first, be one, how we can pool our resources and think about how we can come together, use our resources for ourselves and for one another so we don't have to resort to illegal behavior or violence or tribalism or trying to get any white person's acceptance and approval in order to feel like we can survive. We need to be able to dismiss both the respectability politics and the toxic pop culture. We need to rely on our new Black media, right? To really save ourselves and our children from this mess that we're being fed, because it's not really from us at all, even though we're the ones on the stage or on the microphone or the voice you hear on the radio. This is not coming from us. The solution really is self-love, not just as individuals, but as a people. And when you have a sense of worth that is deeply grounded in you, and that's grounded in your identity as a Black person, as a person with a strong heritage, and you know what that heritage is, that makes you a whole person. We can re-educate ourselves about who we are and what really gives us worth. The clue here is that it's not external, right? The thing that gives us worth is not external to us. It comes from within our community. It comes from within our connection to each other as members of the Black community. It's not in individuals, it's in the group, right? And so there is no reason for us to depend on our adjacency or affiliation with whiteness to feel a sense of worth. That's not where it comes from. So we need to get rerouted in African psychology and using the good sense that our ancestors gave us. And so that's, a big part of it. And then seeing us as an us again, right? So we can recognize when we as a group are being manipulated and played against each other. Because that is how you keep people in bondage, right? Even without the ropes and chains. So we need the village. And if you are a Black parent and you've enjoyed this, you want to help, break down these types of conversations and learn more about some of these lessons that we really need to share with one another and with our children, and just figure out how to navigate these types of tricky situations where you doing your job as a parent, you end up getting criticized by the very people that you're trying to love and support, or you just aren't sure how to make sense out of everything that's coming at you. You can join the Black Parent Village at blackpeoplethrive.com. And, just know that you're not alone on this journey to healing and regrounding ourselves in our inherent worth and our power as Black people. So that's it for today, family. Be well and be one.